Welcome, listeners, to another episode of Nintenno Podcast. This is a super exciting episode for me because, believe it or not, I am creeping up on the 100 hours of playtime mark. So today, we are talking about all the things that I have learned in the past 100 hours and talking about things I wish I would have known when I started the game. So, welcome once again. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Evan, and let's get ready for another episode of Nintenno Podcast. So this episode of Nintenno Podcast is going to be pretty conversational. I don't have it scripted per se. I've just got some talking points, kind of like I've done in my last two interviews, because I really just want to have a chat about what things are like for me right now. I am 100 hours wiser, 100 hours more experienced. I'm still bad at this game, but I'm getting a lot better, and I've learned a lot of stuff. So today, I have 7 things that I have learned in my first 100 hours, and we're going to talk about all of those today. First things first, Warframes start coming faster. Point number 1, I wondered a lot about how to get Warframes, and you'll recall we did some episodes in the beginning about getting Rhino, and as I would talk with my friends, they would constantly be saying, these Warframes look really cool. I do play Warframe, and I want to get more frames, or I don't play the game, but I kind of want to so that I can collect these cool-looking Warframes. That was really the focus for people. So I got a little, I guess you'd say, discouraged, because here I am, I'm 20 hours in, and I only have a couple of the pieces for Rhino, and then it just took forever to get him, I felt like. But my encouragement to you is, Warframes start coming much faster. After I got Rhino, I immediately jumped in and started grinding with him, just like I did with Excalibur. I had Excalibur all the way to level 30, I had a bunch of level 30 gear before I even got into Rhino. When I got into the Rhino skin, or frame rather, I started doing the same exact thing, building up that XP and just playing exclusively with Rhino. I only got to about level 15 before I started crafting my next frame. And because of things like the Twitch Prime deal and all that stuff, I got Trinity Prime pretty quickly just for free. And as I got further into the game, I started doing more varied activities. And so, to be honest, it may sound silly, but time just started moving faster for me. I was having more fun with the game. So right now, I started with Excalibur, as you guys know, and Rhino was my first frame, as it is for most people. But now I have Excalibur, Rhino, Frost, Volt, Oberon, and Trinity Prime. Plus, I have the blueprints for several more frames that I'm getting pretty close on. So, it took me the longest by far to get my second frame. It took me the longest time to craft the first one to get Rhino. But after that, everything just started coming quicker. So, don't be discouraged. If you're still working on your first frame, or maybe you just got your second frame, whatever it may be, and you feel like, man, these frames are coming kind of slowly, don't worry. The more you're opening up the star chart, the more you're getting better gear, and the more you're modding, the more you're going to have access to the places that you need to go to farm out gear and all that stuff, and you're going to get your Warframes faster. Don't stress about that. The second thing, point number 2, I liked bad weapons, and I crafted bad weapons. Now, this may seem kind of silly to say, but really, in starting out the game, you do start with bad gear, just like you do in every game, and they can become better. Like that Mark 1 Bratton, I still really enjoy that gun because I like the way that it feels. But statistically, it's not great. It would be better for me to be using the standard Bratton, or, a prime weapon, something along those lines. But even beyond that, there are just better archetypes of weapons, even beyond leveling up and even beyond getting the prime version of something. So I really, from the start, have been using bad weapons. I also crafted bad weapons. One, I know in particular, the Kraken looked really cool to me, and I was really excited to try out the Kraken. I like those kind of accuracy burst type weapons, and so I was excited to test him out, see what the Kraken would be like, and then I discovered this weapon is hot garbage. I modded it, and I did some fire rate mods, and I did some reload mods to help me be able to get out damage faster, and that helped a lot to kind of mitigate some of the things that I felt were bad about that gun, but it never got to a point where it was viable. I could burn down anything with a Lato, with a my, what's it even called? I can't even remember, but whatever. I had multiple sidearms that would outperform it, and at any given point in time, my primary was always better. The only reason I ever pulled out my Kraken was if I just completely ran out of ammo and everything else. So anyway, all of that is to say, you're probably playing with bad weapons. So try out new ones. Try out new things. Never be afraid to test out some new gear, even if it doesn't look good, even if you're not sure about the stats, even if you don't have a build in mind. Don't stress. A lot of people are kind of hesitant to pull the trigger in certain games about getting new gear or getting new upgrades because they're afraid they're going to do the wrong thing. But really in Warframe, even that bad gear, I still had fun with it. And all of that bad gear pushed me toward higher mastery ranks. So don't be afraid to try new gear, and don't feel bad. You're probably playing with garbage, but you're going to get better stuff soon. And if you're having fun, who the heck cares? So point number 3. The more you play, the more you understand. So one of the very first things that I had issues with when I started Warframe was that it was super overwhelming. You jump in the game and you do that tutorial mission and you're like, this game's kind of cake. This is a baby's first shooter kind of game. To me, it almost felt like something that I don't know if any of you guys owned a PlayStation Vita. I did. I was one of the few, and I loved my PlayStation Vita, but I feel like a lot of the games that I played on that system were ones where it was like one of those, you get your randomly generated level, each level takes 1 minute to 5 minutes to go through, just burn it down real quick, and some of them were hard, like I got super into Ollie Ollie, and I got really into Hotline Miami. Those were super hard games, but a lot of them were pretty easy, and it was mostly just about the fun of jumping in, having a couple seconds of fun, and jumping out. That's what I thought Warframe was in the tutorial and as I first started. But then you get into your landing craft and you see all these different stations and you have no clue how they work. You see all these different places on the star chart that you can't reach. You start hearing things about clans. You start seeing things about prime gear, and just all this stuff is so overwhelming. So if you're starting out in the game, that might be how you feel right now. You might still be at a point where you're like, whoo, this game is just over my head. And I get it. I understand that. To be honest, right now, I'm several episodes in. I'm reaching the double digits in this podcast for episodes, and I still am just super overwhelmed by this game. And I'm supposed to be giving advice to people. So don't stress, because the more you play, the more it makes sense. Here are some examples. When I first started out playing, I only ever auto-filled the mod slots in my gear. Only ever auto-filled. Now, right now, I still use the autofill. When I notice that I got a bunch of levels that I'm missing, I hit autofill, but then I don't back out. I go in and weed through the mods that have been popped in. Now, the reason I do that is that sometimes the game pops in a mod that maybe I hadn't paid attention to. I'm starting to get mods at such a fast rate that a lot of the times I don't even get the chance to read through what the mod descriptors do because I just want to jump back into the next mission. So I use autofill to populate my slots, and then I look through and say, okay, this looks like crap, or hey, I had this mod in mind that sounds a whole lot better than this one, or whatever. So I used to only autofill. I don't do that anymore. When I started the game, I never did void relics. In fact, I didn't do void relics at all. Then I had a point where I did like maybe 3 void fissures in a row, and I was like, okay, this seems like an idea. I don't know if I like it, but whatever. This is another option. I'm probably not going to do these missions very much. And then I just quit. So here I am, nearly 100 hours into this game, and I start to wonder, why am I not getting any prime gear? How do I get this prime gear? Do I have to pay money for it? And then I remember those stupid void fissures. I don't know how I forgot them. It's just there's so much in this game, but I never did void relics. I never joined a clan early in this game. In fact, I had only been in a clan for about a week and a half, 2 weeks when I started recording that clan's episode. It just was something that I'd never really done. I avoided spy missions like the plague. I hated spy missions because I kept failing at different areas. I didn't like the hacking mechanic, whatever. Now I understand all of those things, and spy missions aren't necessarily my favorite mission type, but actually I think I kind of like the capture missions the most because they're really quick, but they're a little bit more engaging than just doing exterminate. Exterminate feels a little long to me. But anyway, getting sidetracked there. All of these things seem really overwhelming, and spy missions felt really overwhelming, but the more you play, the more it's going to make sense. So don't stress. If you're still at a point where you feel overwhelmed, don't stress. Plug along. Do the things in the game that you find fun, because the more you play, the more you listen to this podcast, the more you talk to veterans on Reddit or places like that, the more you're going to start to learn things and start to understand things. So if you've not left yet, don't leave just because you're overwhelmed. But point number 4 is kind of the opposite of that. The more you play, the bigger it gets, and the more complicated it gets. So it's cool because you're not going to be as discouraged as you get further into the game because you understand more, but also the more you get in, oh my gosh, things open up so much. So one of the things I didn't do was I never went to the Plains of Eidolon. I only went to the Plains maybe 15 hours ago, and I'm talking real game time, not literally 15 hours before recording, but you probably figured that out. Plains of Eidolon missions are super fun to me. I think they're crazy cool. You have like 3 missions in one. They're open world. They feel a lot like Far Cry, which actually is one of my favorite series ever. I love those. So Plains missions are crazy. That's a whole other thing that's been added in. Until fairly recently, mostly the way I would play Warframe is I would just do alerts, and then once I had polished off all the alerts, I would do another mission on the star chart. So I've made incredibly slow progress in the star chart, but I've got a lot of credits and I have a decent amount of resources. But I had never done any of the Plains stuff. Like I said, I'd never really done any Void Relic missions, and now I'm doing them constantly because I want that Prime gear. I just started synthesizing things. That's a whole new mechanic. I still have no idea what standing is. Maybe we'll do an episode about that in the future because I see this thing about you can gain daily standing. Here's your daily standing limit. I don't have any clue what that means. I haven't touched the PvP. I'll be transparent. I tried twice. Couldn't find a match, but still haven't actually touched PvP. That's a whole other mode. If it's populated on your platform, then maybe that's an option for you. I keep hearing about how cool sorties are. I keep hearing about hunting eidolons. There's just all these things. And I found that the more I play, the more I understand, but also the more the game opens up. It's just bizarre how deep and how broad this game is. This game is absurdly massive, especially for a free-to-play game. So the more you play, the more you're going to understand. Take heart there. But also, if you're reaching a point, maybe you've been playing for 20, 30 hours and you feel like the game's getting a little repetitious, don't stress about that either, because the more you get in, the more it opens up. When I started out the game, I played for a little bit and I was like, this seems cool. I don't know how long I'm going to stick with it. Then I started thinking about, maybe I'll do a podcast. That'd be a fun way to do it. So I started digging into the game a little bit more, having some more fun. I started the podcast and really got into the game. But I'm not going to lie. About 2 weeks ago or so, I hit a point where I was like, man, these alert missions are getting a little repetitious. Is there something else? Because I'm still having fun, but I don't know how long this is going to hook me. And that was the point where the dam just burst open. That was the point where I started discovering all these things I'm talking about now. There was that Acolytes event that's going on at the time of recording, but it'll be done by the time I post this episode. There was the Twitch streamer event where you could watch Twitch streams and get extra loot. Now I'm discovering Void Relics. It's just, oh my gosh, now I feel like I can't play enough of this game. And the moment that I want to stop, there's another timed event that pops up and I'm like, oh, I kind of need to do that. And I kind of want to do that. Maybe I don't need to sleep tonight. So the more you play, the more you understand, and the bigger the game gets. Point number 5. Some missions need co-op. So this was a growth thing for me. I am not a big fan of playing co-op. I do like it when it's, a personal friend of mine who gets on and we do some 2-play on something. So, my buddy Corey and we jumped into Destiny 2 a lot and we played together. We played a lot of Red Dead Online when that first launched. So anyway, I like doing that. But outside of being with people that I directly know, I'm not a big fan of co-op stuff. I'm not a big fan of doing group missions because mostly I want to go at my own pace. And even playing Warframe, when I first started out doing co-op missions and I would just jump in with a bunch of randos, I would get frustrated because I'm somebody that wants to loot every single chest. I'm somebody who gets super ticked off when people try to do spy missions and they don't know what they're doing. Last night, it was me, and I'm only MR5. So even though I'm 100 hours in, I'm only MR5. But I'm not not some kind of pro, but I jumped in with 2 MR1s and with an MR6. And the MR6 was very clearly not experienced. Even though he had played a ton, I think he'd been basically just kind of grinding slowly and not intentionally trying to get better at the game, if that makes sense. So anyway, we jumped in and they triggered every freaking alarm and we lost a piece of data, and it was on like a crazy easy spy mission. I didn't understand what was even happening. So I had to jump in and carry us for the last 2 data hacks. And that frustrates me. But there's a lot of benefits to running with co-op teams. First of all, it's fun to loot all those containers, and it's good because you're getting resources. But that's not the main way that you should play Warframe. You shouldn't be going through every mission trying to loot every single container and doing all that, because it's not necessary. Those co-op teams will sometimes push you to play in a different way, to maybe try to get to the objective really quick and just burn down that mission so that you can jump into another mission. Because sometimes the reward that you get at the end of a mission that's like, a mod, or like, like with these Acolyte missions where you're getting these special mods, those are more important than the trivial amounts of credits and resources you're going to get by busting open every crate. Now, sometimes you do need to farm resources, but then there's times like this where it's good to have that co-op team that pushes you to play in a different way, to try something new. Playing with a co-op group will force you naturally to learn how to move faster. If you still haven't become proficient at bullet jumping your way through the game, playing co-op will get you there, because you're gonna feel awkward and embarrassed when there's 3 players who are waiting on you at the end. You're gonna want to push to an objective, like with this spy mission I'm playing. These guys are real crappy, and I know that if I'm not moving quickly, they're gonna trip all the alarms and we're gonna fail the mission. And I had just cracked a relic. I didn't want to lose that relic. So it was important to me to speed up. So anyway, that's part of it. You're going to learn a lot by playing in co-op groups. You're also going to get to see frames and weapons and abilities that you didn't realize were in the game that are going to be attractive to you. But then also there are just some missions that are going to be too hard for you to do without a crew, or that are going to take a really long time because of the difficulty level. But when you have that co-op crew, it's going to go better. So point number 5, some missions just need co-op. It's better to have a party some of the time. I still play solo a lot, but you know what I'm saying. It's great to play co-op. Point number 6. You are gonna need advice to get the most out of this game. You're just gonna need advice. You're gonna need people who have played this game who can tell you how to do it. Because, again, this game is complicated. There's a lot of layers to this. This is like a 7-layer bean dip of complexity. That was a great metaphor, wasn't it? Feel free to use that at some point if you just need a real good spicy metaphor. Anyway, you're going to need people. Now, that's part of why I created this podcast. I wanted to have something that we can talk through things as they occur. I said early on, when you jump into a wiki, it's such a deep well of information that it's kind of hard to learn anything about it by just jumping into a wiki. In my opinion, as a new player, you really need a resource like this podcast, because we're encountering things live. We're encountering things as you're probably coming up to them. We're starting to talk about them. So you need that. But then you also need people like on the Warframe Reddit who can give you advice, who can tell you more about the games. You need to pay attention to Twitch. Here's some examples. I learned about this Acolytes event from a veteran player, and I've been getting some sweet mods. I'm going to make a decent amount of platinum back off of this event, and I've got some new mods that I didn't have before, and I only learned about this event because of somebody else. To be honest, I probably would have skipped over the alerts about this event when they popped up in the game, because I didn't realize they weren't important, and I didn't understand how they worked. And that's the other thing too, explaining obscure mechanics. That's a big one. It's so helpful and so important to have veterans that can explain some of the more obscure things to you, or that can point out to you, hey, it's important for you not to ignore this. It's important for you to go check out your void relics. Maybe you need to enhance those void relics. It's important to have players who are going to tell you, hey, here's where you can find this resource. Here's something that's worth your time, and here's something that's not. So, you're going to need advice. You're going to need help. If you want to stick with this podcast, I'd love for you to stick with this podcast. But even if you don't, this isn't a shameless plug. Even if you don't stick with me, find somebody you can talk through with this game. Play through this with people, because it's so much better. And honestly, you're going to need it. And finally, point number 7. You can't waste time in Warframe. Now, you can be inefficient. Sure, you can be inefficient, but you can't waste time. Here's what I mean. Early on, and actually in pretty much any game that I play, I'm always like, man, am I being efficient? Am I wasting my time by doing this thing? In Warframe, I wonder that a lot. There's so many different things to do. I had heard from some veteran players that early on in the game, it's a waste of time for you to go to the Plains of Eidolon. What they mean by that is the resources that you're gleaning from doing Plains missions are things that aren't going to benefit you a ton until you get into higher MRs. So it's not a waste of time. You're just getting things that aren't helping you a lot in the early game, and it would be more efficient for you to go somewhere else. I am really bad right now, in fact. Even though I'm more experienced now in this game than what I was before, I'm really bad about forgetting that I'm rocking a full kitted out level 30 set of gear. I'll jump into an alert mission or whatever, and I'm playing as a level 30 Warframe. I'm playing with level 30 primaries and secondaries, level 30 blades, all that stuff. So I'm wasting affinity. It would be far more efficient for me to bring along an untested sidearm, or for me to bring along a melee weapon that I want to boost, or whatever, just to get that affinity going through it. But it's still not a waste of time, because when I do that alert mission, I'm getting more credits than I typically would get in a regular mission. Maybe getting a mod. Maybe I'm getting a helmet for one of my favorite Warframes. So even then, even when I'm decked out in level 30 gear and I'm not gaining affinity, I'm still not wasting time because I'm gaining resources. And I can think of tons of examples like that. You might think that it's a waste of time for me to be running so many alerts, but they've given me a ton of credits that I've been pumping into my clans, and that's been great. You might think that it's a waste of time to be clearing the star chart because you don't feel anything different. You're like, okay, great, here's yet another exterminate mission that I can be doing. But then an event like our current one, the Acolytes mission, something like that rolls along, and you get something that pops up and you're like, yeah, I'm ready to fight this Acolyte. Crap, I can't because I don't have access to that node. So no matter what you're doing in this game, you can be inefficient. And yeah, it is probably a waste of time for you to level up to rank 30 on all of your gear, not put any mods on it, and only ever play the tutorial mission. Yeah, that's probably a waste of time. But really, it's hard. It's incredibly hard to waste time in Warframe because you're constantly getting resources, you're constantly getting credits, you're constantly getting mods and getting Warframe parts and getting weapon parts and all of that stuff. So don't stress. Have fun with this game. It's a blast, and it's going to open up the more and more you get into it. And yeah, you may look back and say, man, I wish I would have been more efficient, but don't stress about wasting your time. So there you have it. I'm nearly 100 hours into this game, and as I said, I've gone through kind of some waves in my interest here. I haven't been playing long, but early on, after the newness had worn off, and after the newness of this podcast had worn off, I started to hit that point of thinking, man, this is going to be repetitious, and now I am completely in the opposite direction. I was in the middle of Rise of the Tomb Raider. I started that because I'm always running two games. I'm always running one thing on my Switch and one thing on my PlayStation. I play my Switch game when I'm out or when I want to play some Warframe, and then I play my PlayStation 4 at home. And so anyway, I just polished off Red Dead 2. I jumped into Rise of the Tomb Raider, having a lot of fun with it. I got exactly halfway through, according to a walkthrough that I checked, and I've stopped completely. Haven't touched it because of Warframe. I have Smash Bros right now, and I'm super addicted to Smash Bros. At least I was, because I haven't touched it in a couple weeks. Gosh, man, Warframe is just blowing my mind right now, and I hope that you guys are having that same experience. So this is what it's been for me in my first 100 hours in this game. I'm about to hit that mark. I'm curious for you guys, and I would love for you to write into the show and let me know where you are in this game. Let's make this a social thing. Let's make this a conversation. That was one of our goals for the podcast. Write into me and let me know how many hours you've put in. Let me know what MR you're at. Let me know if you feel like you're wasting time. Let me know if you're blown away by all of these new mission types. Let me know if you're stuck on something. Tell me what your first however many hours has been like, and then let me know what you're working towards. I would love to hear what kind of thing you're striving towards, what goal you have in Warframe, and what you're reaching for. So, thank you so much for listening to this episode of Nintenno Podcast. I have been your host, Evan. As always, you can follow us on Facebook at Nintenno Podcast, facebook.com/Nintenno Podcast, and you can write into the show at nintennopodcast@gmail.com. Send us your feedback about the show. If you like the way I do certain episodes or you don't, let me know, because I want to cater this show to you. If you have advice for future topics, I'd love to know, because my well of ideas is not as deep as the well of content in Warframe. So if you have thoughts or suggestions for future episodes, send those over to me. Don't forget to follow us on all your favorite podcast platforms, and if you're interested in something different, don't forget to check out Wizard Tank Games and the Wizard Tank Podcast. One quick thing, I know I've plugged that podcast a couple times. I am not the one who runs that podcast. My buddy Adam is the one who runs that. Even now, when I'm DMing the game, he's still the one that runs that podcast. So I'm not entirely sure about the upload schedule. I'm not sure how things work along those lines. So if things aren't exactly what you expect with the timeline on that, don't stress about it. We're a lot more laid back in that podcast than we are in this one. But nonetheless, if you're into Dungeons & Dragons, it's a fun time. Make sure you go check it out. And one more quick plug, make sure that you're getting onto YouTube and onto Twitch and watching some streamers and supporting those people who are making great Warframe content. I mentioned guys like Skill Up. He's not the only one who makes good content. There's tons of people who spend a lot of time making content. Go support the community. Grow the community. Get out there and check it out and have fun on YouTube and on Twitch watching people play this game and engage. Thank you guys for listening once again, and you can expect us to be back in 1 week's time for another episode of Nintenno Podcast. And until then, keep on farming those frames.
You're on the sensors now. You've been detected. Heavy robotic signature detected. Lock and load. Broken their ranks and they are on the run. Another successful mission. Find extraction.